The night my neighbor asked me to help him carry something, I remember thinking first about how cold the concrete felt through the soles of my shoes. How the streetlight outside my house flickered the way it always did when the air got damp. How ordinary it all was, because ordinary details have a way of sticking when nothing feels dangerous yet. And he'd said it casually, leaning over the low fence between our houses like he'd done 100 times before, saying he just needed an extra pair of hands for a minute. That it wouldn't take long. And there was nothing about his voice that sounded urgent or strange. Nothing about his posture that felt threatening. I knew him well enough to recognize the rhythm of his speech, the way he smiled when he talked. So I said sure without thinking, stepping out into the narrow space between our houses where the sound of the city dulled into something distant and muted. At first, everything felt exactly as expected. The air smelling faintly of wet leaves and metal, the hum of traffic far away, the quiet comfort of familiarity settling over me as I followed him towards his garage, which sat half open like it usually did, spilling out a strip of yellow light onto the driveway. And as we walked, he talked about nothing important, work, how late it had gotten without either of us noticing, about small things that didn't matter. I remember thinking how tired I was, how I just wanted to get back inside once this was done, how there was nothing about this moment that would stand out later. And that thought alone is what makes it strange now. Because standing there, in the glow of that garage light, nothing looked wrong. Not the shelves lining the walls, not the stacked boxes, not the way the shadows pooled in the corners. And when he gestured towards the back of the garage and said the thing was just behind some storage, I stepped forward without hesitation, ducking slightly under the hanging cord, and that's when the quiet began to feel heavier. Not suddenly, just enough that I noticed it because the door behind us didn't close, but the sound from outside seemed to dull further, like the space itself was absorbing them. As I moved deeper into the garage, stepping past old tools and covered furniture, I started to realize how much space there was back there. More than I had expected. More than should have fit. And I slowed without meaning to, asking what exactly he needed help with. And he answered vaguely, saying I'd see in a second. His voice still calm, still friendly, but now coming from behind me instead of beside me. I remember turning my head slightly, catching his reflection in a dusty mirror mounted on the wall, noticing how still he was, how he wasn't reaching for anything, wasn't preparing to lift anything at all. And the first real jolt of unease came then. It was sharp and sudden, because it struck me that I'd walked farther in than he had, that he let me move ahead without guiding me, without pointing, and when I stopped completely and turned around asking again what he needed, he smiled in a way that felt rehearsed, not fake exactly, but practiced, and said, "Just a second," and stepped towards the garage door, pulling it down a few inches. Not enough to close it, just enough to dim the light. And that's when my body reacted before my mind did. A tightening in my chest, a sudden awareness of how enclosed the space felt, how far the exit suddenly seemed. And I took a step back, saying something about coming back later, about needing to go, and he didn't argue, didn't block me, didn't rush, he just watched. And that calm was worse than anything else. Because calm means control, and as I moved towards the opening, my foot brushed against something on the floor, something solid that hadn't been there when I walked in. And I looked down and saw a thick coil of rope laid out neatly by the back wall. Not tangled, not thrown aside, but arranged. And the sight of it hit me with a clarity so sharp it almost hurt. Because ropes don't belong on the floor unless someone plans to use them. And I looked back up at him and saw that he was no longer smiling. Not frowning either, just watching me with a kind of quiet expectation. Like this was the moment he'd been waiting for. Without another word, I turned and I ran. Not full speed at first, because part of me still didn't want to believe it. Part of me still clung to the idea that I was misunderstanding something. When I heard the garage door scrape lower behind me, the metal groaning as it moved, the hesitation vanished, and I sprinted through the gap, stumbling into the open air. Heart slamming so hard it felt like it might break my ribs, not stopping until I reached the middle of the street under the flickering light, where I finally turned back, expecting to see him chasing after me, shouting, angry, something obvious. But instead, the garage door was open again. Fully this time, the light spilling out like nothing had happened, and he stood there in the doorway watching me, not calling out, not moving, just looking. And that image stays with me more than anything else, because it meant I hadn't ruined a plan. I just interrupted it. I stood there shaking, the cold biting into my skin. All I could think about was how easily I'd stepped into that space, how normal it had felt to say yes, how close I'd come to staying just a little bit longer. And even now, I don't know what he's going to ask me to help him with, or what would have happened if I hadn't noticed the rope when I did. Only that the offer had never been about carrying anything, and that whatever he needed, he had expected me not to run.